Vogue is the most influential fashion magazine, reporting on the latest trends in fashion and lifestyle. For the first 40 years of Vogue, illustration played a pivotal role in the development of this publication. This period is known as the Illustration Era. In 1892, New York was a symbol of modernity. Big fortunes have been built. New York society was flourishing. The Astors, the Appletons, the Vanderbilts, you name it. They were part of an elite of new millionaires who had made their fortunes in a young America that was developing into a modern part of the world. The New York society was building fabulous mansions and throwing lavishing parties, and everyone was curious to know what was going on there. Not to mention that not only were these millionaires making their fortunes, there was a growing middle class with disposable income who aspired to live the same lavish lifestyle of the upper classes. In order to report on their luxurious lifestyle, there were several publications. It is in this context that Vogue is born, as a social gazette. Vogue was founded by Arthur Baldwin Turner in 1892 in New York. It was a weekly society journal covering the lifestyle of New York society, reporting on their parties, travels, their social etiquette, and about the latest fashions. In 1909, enters Condé Nast, a businessman with experience in publishing who transforms Vogue into a woman's magazine. The woman's magazine business, Vogue was competing with magazines like The Delineator, McCall's, and Harper's Bazaar. These magazines would dispute the reader's attention, and the cover of the magazine was the way to do it. In the illustration era, magazines featured two types of artists. The first one was considered to be the serious artists, the painters like Matisse, Picasso, Miro. It is believed that they accepted these commissions to promote their work, and the magazines were an aesthetically attractive way to do so. They could build a following this way. The second types of artists were the professional illustrators. They were well known like Alphonse Mucha, Charles Dana Gibson. Some of these illustrators were so identified with the magazines that their names were incorporated into the covers. Until 1916, Vogue covers would depict the latest fashions in Paris. But by 1916, influenced by the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, fashion gave place to art in the covers of Vogue. The contemporary art in the covers of this magazine showed that Vogue was updated with the art world as well as fashion. Art, literature, interior design, and fashion would be part of the taste that Vogue was meant to create. An exclusive group of artists would give character and personality to the magazine, depicting a woman that was soft, elegant, and refined, in the way the woman that all women aspire to be. Condé Nast is going to establish a series of rules for the cover of magazine. The cover should always be in color. Vogue should use a limited roster of artists. It must bear the artist's signatures, incorporate the word Vogue in the design, transmit elegance, refinement, and social position. In the 1910s, illustrations would inform on the latest fashions in hemline's length, the fashionable hairstyles, but also relating to the world events. We shall not forget that this is a moment in which fashion is starting to change rapidly. But also the world is about to change, because with the advent of World War I, things are going to be completely different after this war. So Vogue is not going to miss out on these events. We can see, for example, two women watching military warplanes in the sky in May's edition of 1918, or a woman waving at the Allies troops passing by the window in the June edition of the same year. George Planck would work for Vogue for 16 years, from 1911 to 1927, one of the most prolific illustrators of the magazine. Only in 1912, Blanc created 6 covers for the magazine. Blanc was very artistic, creating an ideal. The women were depicted in voluminous skirts with bows and ruffles. These women, who were very stylized, show the reader what to wear, when, and how. The only woman in this list, Helen Dryden. She worked in Vogue from 1909 to 1923. Dryden was more formal, illustrating the message which was the fashion that Vogue was reporting on. Her work was highly decorative and cheerful. The woman Dryden depicted was an elegant, well-read woman of fashion. We can see this woman performing activities such as reading, surrounded by nature. In June 1920, it is Dryden who illustrates the first cover of French Vogue with 2 badminton players, a portrait of the active woman of the 1920s. The 1920s were influenced by art the most. Art Deco, with its geometry and vibrant colors, gave a more geometric feel to the illustrations. Art movements like Expressionism, Fauvism, and Cubism would leave their mark as great influencers in the style of Vogue illustrators in this decade. The French illustrator Georges Lepape came from the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. His partnership with Vogue started in 1916 and ended in 1939. Lepape was the most important illustrator at Vogue in the 1920s, making a total of 70 covers in this decade only. Lepape was the first to experiment with close-ups of faces in the cover of the magazine. It depicted a very tall and lit woman. Due to the visual impact and the amount of covers that he made, Lepape's work is today one of the greatest examples of the illustration era in Vogue. Spaniard Eduardo Garcia Benito also came from the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. He starts working in Vogue in 1921, but it is in 1926 that his work becomes more dominant in the magazine. His elongated figures and modernistic heads were combined with architecture. Faces are elegant, lips are like rosebuds, reminding us the bee stings lipstick trend of the 1920s. From 1926, his illustrations are clearly inspired by Art Deco, becoming more geometrical and using the V of Vogue as an opportunity for the geometric style. Benito made a total of 144 covers for Vogue. He is the one who made most covers for the magazine. In the early 30s, Vogue covers by Parisian artists started to decline. Edna Woolman Chase, the chief editor, did not appreciate the lack of accurate detail of illustrations that, in her opinion, served more the artist than informed the reader. In the 1930s, the images will become more realistic. Vogue returns to a more informative period, and this decade sees the decline of the illustrated cover to give space to photography, but even then, there is an illustrator who makes the decade. When Carl Erickson, known as Eric, debuted on the cover of the magazine in 1930, his style marked the style cover of the decade, the close-up of a woman with heavily lined eyes and a fashion element. Could be a hat, a glove, a pair of sunglasses, but she was always holding something that was referring to fashion. This woman would appear in the covers looking at herself in the mirror, applying her makeup, doing her hair. Through his illustration, readers could see this woman living her life, going places, doing things. Some experts see Eric as the artist between the illustration and the photography era. On the 15th of January 1913, the French photographer Adolphe Meyer publishes a picture of Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney. This photograph is considered a turning point, creating a fusion between the social photography with fashion photography. Vogue would continue to use both illustration and photography. On July 1st, 1932, Edward Steichen, who was the head of photography for Vogue, debuts the first color photography for the magazine. This would set the trend for the future, leading to the end of the illustration era. I'm Estela Mendes. This is Fashion History Sessions. If you like this video, please like and subscribe.